I have shifted the quilt one time, and we now have this border on this end showing. This end of the quilt is parallel, it was even with the end of the table. This edge of the quilt is even with the table. This green border on this end is parallel with this end, and the purple stripe going down this side is parallel with that side. So we have just shifted it up to where we can get to the rest of this part of the quilt. When we do this, we will shift it this way and get this segment of the quilt, and then shift it one last time and get that corner up there. The clamping and shifting is the same no matter how large your quilt is. If you're doing a queen size quilt, you may want to get two of those large brown banquet tables and put them side to side, where you will have a 60-inch by 72-inch or 98-inch, depending on the size of the table, and you can pin a larger section that way. But whatever size you have, use it and just keep shifting your quilt. So I'll finish pinning this and then shift it, and we'll be ready to go to the next step. Okay, I finished pinning the second section. I want to show you how to shift your quilt over. I removed all the clamps and put them in the center so they won't fall on the floor when I shift it. I want to take it just like the old tablecloth trick when you jerked everything out from under the dishes. You want to take it and pull evenly from both edges and pull straight toward you so that this edge stays even with the edge of the table. You want to keep it as squared up as you pull as you can. You're going to pull on it until you see the far edge come up. And I'm going to wind up dumping all this on the floor, so I'm going to put that up there. And come a little bit further. Get all that up there. Now make sure this edge stays even with the table. We're going to even all of our layers out, and that edge is even with the far side of the table. If you feel any wrinkles in there, just hand work them out. Get that even, and then we're going to clamp this section and pin it, and we'll be ready to do some quilting. I have my complete quilt top pinned now, and I have trimmed. Now I trimmed closer than I usually do because this is cotton batting and it will roll up bigger, so I wanted to trim closer. Leave about 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches around, all the way around your quilt when you trim it off so you don't have all that extra to deal with. Make sure when you turn it on the back there are no obvious wrinkles, that you have pinned the quilt and left the wrinkles in the backing. If you have wrinkles back there, you have to unpin it and start over again. So check for wrinkles and then trim the quilt top. And we're ready to go to the sewing machine now, so let's get started. We're ready to finish our quilt top now. We've pin basted it together, so we have all the layers sandwiched together and they can't shift too much. So we're ready to decide how to finish it. You can get a frame like this. It's very inexpensive, and you can quilt on this if you would like, hand quilt. Also, you can get just a hoop, and these are nice if you're going to be taking it places, be very mobile, such as in the car and when you go places. So this single hoop is very nice. However, my favorite, it's a double hoop. It has a lower hoop on it. It's actually 2 sizes, and it sits up in your lap. And you can hand quilt while you're in the car or at home in the evenings. It's just very relaxing. You can learn how to hand quilt on the internet. They have videos on it. And it's very relaxing and very mobile and makes it a pleasure to do. Today, however, I'm going to show you how to quilt this on your sewing machine instead of having to deal with the hand quilting or taking it to someone else, and show you how you can do some of, especially the smaller size quilts, at home on your own. So we'll get busy with that now. To be able to quilt on your sewing machine, you will need the sewing machine, but you will also need a screwdriver to attach either a walking foot or a free motion foot to your machine. The walking foot has an arm that goes up and down with the screw on your machine so that every time your needle goes up and down, it goes up and down. And it has a set of feed dogs for the top, and that's what it's cranking, or those little feed dogs. So it pulls all of the layers through evenly. Your free motion foot has a spring on it. When you have it on your machine, it stays still, but it bounces, and you're able to move your quilt underneath it in any direction so that you can quilt free motion and do circles, different designs such as this on the areas of your quilt that you want to. You have to practice with this with a little quilt sandwich first, but it's very worthwhile. It's very rewarding when you do. So let's get these on the machine and then we will get started. To prepare for quilting on the sewing machine, I've attached my walking foot and I have rolled my quilt tightly from one edge to the center. This is my center right here. I'm going to sew down this seam all the way to the other end before I stop. You want to quilt in as long a spans as you can so you're not constantly cutting your thread. You're going to take this and fold it as tightly as you can so that it will fit in this little opening. Then you're going to put it in your lap and fan fold it. Take your needle, go down in the beginning of that stitching line. We're going to stitch in the ditch. So we want to go down in that stitching line and bring up our bobbin thread and hold it out to the side so we don't have that bird's nest on the back. Then I'm going to put my needle down in there and lower my walking foot. Now I want to go back a couple of stitches before I start forward. Remember to pull sideways. Keep it from bubbling up in the front of it. And keep fan folding the quilt in your lap to keep it loose. You don't want any drag on the quilt. Each time you reposition your hand, make sure you are in needle down position. Some machines have an automatic needle down. If yours does not, just make sure, hold it in place until you can hand crank it down. And I'll continue until I get to the end of this ditch, this seam line that I'm stitching in. Try to get it right inside the seam line. When I'm done, I'll go to the next one. I want to work in one direction and then the other one until I have all of these seam lines quilted. When you get to the end of that seam, do not go into the border section. You'll be able to see that very well and it won't look good. Hit your reverse button and slowly back up a couple of stitches to lock it. And then you can pull to the side, cut your top thread, and then go underneath and cut your bobbin thread. And you're ready to go to the next seam. When you finish that seam, stop and look on the back. Make sure your tension is good. Make sure your seam is nice and straight. No puckers, no ruffles, none of that. And then you'll know you're doing it correctly. Continue until you get all of the seams this way. Then do all the other direction seams. When you get all of that done, the last thing we'll do are the seams on the inside and the outside of this border so we can do some free motion quilting in there. So let's get busy and finish